So I had a friend who was asked to come to give a training session to a group of sales representatives. They specifically worked for a cosmetic company, and so my friend came into the training session prepared to meet a lot of women and a lot of people who were interested in cosmetics. Well, as it turns out, she was actually supposed to lead this training session on email etiquette for the people that worked and that tried to coordinate the logistics between the warehouse and the suppliers. Lo and behold, she found out that she didn't know anything about her audience, and all the funny jokes she had about makeup weren't going to fly. This is a good example of why we as good speakers need to learn as much as we can about our audience before we get there. Because the point of any presentation is to really deliver a message to somebody, to the audience. And an effective speaker is going to customize their message to the actual people that they're presenting to. So today we're going to look at 3 types of assessments that you can do to analyze your audience. We're going to look at a demographic assessment, a psychological assessment, and then lastly we're going to look at the situational assessment. So let's begin by talking about a demographic assessment. What kind of questions should you try to find out about your audience before you get to that actual presentation day? First of all, you want to find out what are the range of ages that are going to be present in the audience. Is there a primary generation that will be present, or will it be quite a diverse group of people? And what you want to think about are, what are the values of each of the generations represented? What are some of their beliefs? What are some pop culture references that they will or won't get based on the generation that they come from? Remember, the key of being an excellent presenter is being able to create some common ground and connection with your audience. So you want to know how you can do that. And I think age is a good place to start. You also might want to find out the number of men and women present. This would be good to know if you're going to have a predominantly male or female audience. More than likely you'll have a nice diverse mix of both of the sexes. It would also be wise for you to find out the different culture, ethnic, and races that are represented in your audience. Again, so that you can be sensitive to cultural differences, perhaps statements that you might make that others won't understand, or gestures that you perhaps shouldn't use because it means something offensive in someone else's culture. It would also be good for you to find out what kind of groups are the audience members affiliated with. Are they all part of the same group? Do they come from different groups or different parts of an organization? This would give you some insight into their relationship to each other. You might also want to find out their educational levels, and then also you want to ask the question, what does this group have in common? Because you want to create that connection not only between yourself and the audience, but you also want to find out what is common among them, what do they have in common, what's a uniting factor for this group of individuals. So these are some good questions that will help you just gain a little bit of demographic information, but you also want to focus on perhaps their attitude towards you as well as the topic. So this is where we look at a psychological assessment. It would be good for you to consider what the possible reaction of your audience will be to the topic that you're presenting. A good way to do this is to decide whether you think your audience is going to be interested or disinterested in general, if they will view your topic favorably or unfavorably, and then also, are they a captive audience or is this a voluntary audience? Are they here because they want to hear what you have to say, or is somebody telling them they have to be here? These are important, and they will help you to know how to approach your audience. You might also consider how your audience will react to you as the speaker. What might they view favorably? What might they view unfavorably? And how can you address that in your presentation? If my friend had thought about the demographic information and the psychological assessment before she gave this training session, she would have discovered that the common bond among these individuals was really that they wanted to learn how to communicate efficiently via email, so that they could do their job better. Not necessarily a group of sales reps who marketed to customers, hey, come get our products, come try our products, they're great. Their common interest was different, and what they wanted to get from the presentation was different. The focus should have been on efficiency rather than perhaps a creative email. She really would have understood that a lot better had she assessed her audience beforehand. Some other questions that you might want to consider when you're putting together your psychological assessment are, what are some references that they won't understand? And then lastly, if you're talking about a particular topic, what's a belief that you may need to address that they hold? Also, you might want to think about what will motivate this audience. What are motivational factors for this particular group of people? And then lastly, as much as you are finding out the commonalities among the individuals sitting in your room, you want to avoid stereotyping or overgeneralizing. In the past, I've had several students who do this, who kind of group everybody that fits in this category must feel this way. For instance, I had a young man who was speaking about women's roles, and he made the reference that all women want to have children. Immediately, as soon as he does that, he has alienated some of the women in the room that perhaps don't share that interest. And we want to make sure that we don't do that as speakers. We want to find out what they have in common, but certainly not overgeneralize that everybody feels exactly the same way based on one of their characteristics. The last thing that you want to do is you want to consider where you're giving this presentation and all of the factors that are contextual factors that may influence how you give this speech. So for instance, you want to find out the time of day that you'll give the presentation. People tend to be a lot more alert and awake at 9 a.m. than they are at 4:30 p.m. So this would be a good thing for you to find out. How aware and how awake will your audience be for you? Also, the location. You want to consider how will the room be arranged? Are you going to be on a stage? Are you going to be on the same level as your audience? Will the chairs be arranged in a U shape? Will it be stadium seating? This will certainly affect how well you can kind of connect with your audience and maybe where you want to speak from. You might also want to find out, will you be required to use a microphone, or is that not necessary? And then also, what other types of equipment do you need perhaps for your visual aid? Will you have access to internet? Will you have access to a computer and a projector screen so that you can display your PowerPoint? These are some important questions to ask beforehand. I also think that you should ask, how big of an audience can you expect? How many people will be present? Speaking to a room full of 30 is very different than speaking to a room full of 3,000 people. So these are important questions to ask beforehand. And then lastly, you want to ask the question, what is it that is bringing this group of people together? Why are they a group, and for what purpose are they gathering to hear my presentation? This may give you some insight into what they expect to get from your presentation. And if you can find out what that expectation is, hopefully you will be able to meet it. The next thing that I'd like to talk about, once you've considered who your audience is how to choose a great topic. And it's really simple. There are only 2 rules that you need to think about. When you choose a topic, you need to choose a topic that A, you're passionate about, and B, that is relevant to your audience. If you will stick to those 2 principles, then I think you're going to find yourself a winning topic. Once you have chosen something that you'd like to speak on, you want to narrow that general subject to a very specific topic. More than likely, you will have a time frame during which you can present. For my classes, you'll be speaking from between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the actual presentations. That's actually a lot shorter than you may think. So the more specific you can be with what you want to cover, the easier job you're going to have as you go throughout the entire presentation. So for instance, if you decide that you want to speak on an inspirational person, and you decide, I would like to speak on Oprah Winfrey, you need to narrow that down a little bit. Oprah Winfrey has done a lot of things, and there's a lot of different directions you could go in that speech. So for instance, maybe you want to talk about the 3 most important contributions that Oprah Winfrey has made in the United States. That particular speech will be very different from another one that you could give. Perhaps you would rather talk about how Oprah's global impact on women's rights and education. These 2 speeches will go in different directions, and you'll cover different kinds of material. So you should try to decide which direction you really want to go in. Or let's say that you want to give a more practical speech, how to do something, and you know a lot about tire maintenance. So you decide that's my subject that I'm going to talk on, is tire maintenance. You again want to consider, how can you make that more specific and focused? Maybe you want to talk about how to change a tire with some very clear steps to be able to build that skill for your audiences. Or perhaps you want to talk about 3 things that you should do to ensure a long tire life, to get the most out of the tires that you can get. The information that you would share in the second speech is quite different than how to change a tire. So to recap for today, we've talked about two important ideas when it comes to public speaking. The first is considering who your audience is. You want to ask good questions about their demographic information, their psychological profile, how they feel about you and your topic. And then lastly, you want to ask some good questions about the situation or the contextual factors that will influence your presentation. And then the last thing that we've covered is how to pick a good topic. Remember, choose something that you're passionate about and choose something that your audience can benefit from hearing. Thanks so much and have a great day.